There's this guy on Twitter named Michael Ripp, Michael.
Yeah.
Rippe.
Oh, the Ripper?
Hey, is that what they call him?
Yes. Riper? That's what I believe.
He's some chief
Ripper.
something officer for some Bitcoin poker thing, but super analytics guy.
Okay.
He put out some good stats that we need to chit-chat about. Cleveland has a historically good defense. They've only allowed 1,002 yards through 5 games this year. That's the fewest by any unit since 1972. That's a long time ago.
Yeah,
wow. You know who that group probably was in 72? Probably a team that went undefeated.
Yep. Could have been.
If we had to guess, the Dolphins in 1972. Not 100% sure because he did not follow up with that. But we're watching in real time is a legendary defense in Cleveland. And if Deshaun Watson gets back in there and their offense can continue to go without Chubb, with Hunt and Ford, it's like, why not the Cleveland Browns, A.J. Hawk?
Why not? I mean, I think, believe me, there's a bunch of hope here in Ohio. I'm around a lot of Browns fans, and they've gone through the roller coaster as this season has gone, and they feel pretty good right now. I know that.
Let's talk about another one that he had about the L.A. Rams. Kyron Williams ran for 158 yards. The Rams finally got a run game. Okay, This is a big deal. They hadn't had it for a very long time. In Cooper Kupp and Matthew Stafford's connection, Cooper had 148 yards receiving. The Rams are fun to watch. That's a good call, Ripper, with a little punditry there at the end. But if you watch what Stafford and Kupp are able to do, they haven't missed a damn thing.
Nope.
They have these long out. I don't even know what it is. He's on the right hash.
Yeah.
Drop. There's this guy on. There's this guy on Twitter named Michael Ripp, Michael.
Yeah.
Rippe.
Oh, the Ripper?
Hey, is that what they call him?
Yes. Riper? That's what I believe.
He's some chief
Ripper.
something officer for some Bitcoin poker thing, but super analytics guy.
Okay.
He put out some good stats that we need to chit-chat about. Cleveland has a historically good defense. They've only allowed 1,002 yards through 5 games this year. That's the fewest by any unit since 1972. That's a long time ago.
Yeah,
wow. You know who that group probably was in 72? Probably a team that went undefeated.
Could have been.
If we had to guess, the Dolphins in 1972. Not 100% sure because he did not follow up with that. But we're watching in real time is a legendary defense in Cleveland. And if Deshaun Watson gets back in there and their offense can continue to go without Chubb, with Hunt and Ford, it's like, why not the Cleveland Browns, A.J. Hawk?
Why not? I mean, I think, believe me, there's a bunch of hope here in Ohio. I'm around a lot of Browns fans, and they've gone through the roller coaster as this season has gone, and they feel pretty good right now. I know that.
Let's talk about another one that he had about the L.A. Rams. Kyron Williams ran for 158 yards. The Rams finally got a run game. Okay, This is a big deal. They hadn't had it for a very long time. In Cooper Kupp and Matthew Stafford's connection, Cooper had 148 yards receiving. The Rams are fun to watch. That's a good call, Ripper, with a little punditry there at the end. But if you watch what Stafford and Kupp are able to do, they haven't missed a damn thing.
Nope.
They have these long out. I don't even know what it is. He's on the right hash.
Yeah.
Drop. There's this guy on Twitter named Michael Ripp, Michael.
Yeah.
Rippe.
Oh, the Ripper?
Hey, is that what they call him?
Yes. Riper? That's what I believe.
He's some chief something officer for some. There's this guy on Twitter named Michael Ripp, Michael.
Yeah.
Rippe.
Oh, the Ripper?
Hey, is that what they call him?
Yes.
Riper?
That's what I believe.
He's some chief
Ripper.
something officer for some Bitcoin poker thing, but super analytics guy.
Okay.
He put out some good stats that we need to chit-chat about. Cleveland has
Okay, we are finally live. It is Monday, 9/9/24, which means some of you actually got to call 911 based on their team's performance, whether that's your real favorite team or your fantasy team. Now, look, I couldn't start week one of the 2024 NFL season by not giving some love to my team, the Miami Dolphins. You see the jerseys, Zach Thomas, Jason Taylor. Anytime I do these streams, I've got them in the background. And obviously, as a Dolphins fan, I wake up today, it is Victory Monday. But it's not about the Dolphins. And quite frankly, the fact that the Dolphins won is kind of a surprise. They didn't play well. We'll get to that, and we'll get to a lot more from the week that was. It was a long first week of football. Obviously, we do have Monday Night Football tonight, and we have a great one. We have the New York Jets and the San Francisco 49ers. There's so much to dive in from an offseason, from a preseason, from the season, what we thought was going to happen, what did happen, what you think is going to happen. I got a great show today, the morning after football, TMA football. And this is the first one that I'm doing now, just to give you a heads up in case you tap in or listen. The way this is going to work in general is kind of like the Manning Cast. The Manning Cast doesn't run every single week. It runs a lot of weeks, but not every week. That's my plan right now for the morning after football. And it's because I'm passionate and I love the game. I love talking about it with some of the brightest sports minds that are either up and coming, established across the social landscape digitally. And this is one way we can do it. So work with me through the kinks, stick with me. I will promise to try to do my best to bring you the best information that can help you win. Now, if you haven't gone on X recently, and that I mean in the last hour, I did drop a new segment and a new piece called Box Score Breakdowns, which is a new version of my takeaways from last season. But I look at the box scores and I kind of see what interests me, what's intriguing, what could potentially be helpful if I track it all season and monitor it. So Box Score Breakdowns is on my X profile right now. Go there to see some of the cool stats. We'll break that down here during the program. We're going to run for about an hour, have an awesome week one to dive into. I know you're excited about football. Man, I'm excited. We're going to start with my guy who covers and talks about the NFL, and we've had a lot of back and forth conversations about the teams, the drafts, the players. My guy T. Bush. We are going to bring him in shortly here, but I do want to intro and talk about some other things. First off, if you're watching this and you want to support and you want to sponsor and you have a connection or you want to advertise, there'll be spots and openings for that. And that's the way that this show can get better and take it to the next level. I obviously had some unfortunate personal events over the last month. If you follow my profile, you'll know that kind of hindered some of the production that I wanted to add to this show and value, but I'm still going to do my best, and we're going to start from the bottom and hopefully take it higher. Also, like I said, this won't be every week, at least not sure yet. I know I'm here back next week. We're going to start the first 2 weeks, and hopefully, based on my schedule, we'll be able to do every week at 7:30 a.m. Pacific time when you wake up on the West Coast, 10:30 a.m. Eastern. Why'd I choose that time? Because it's before the Pat McAfee show, the best show on TV. I think if you watch this, you go into that, you get all the football you could possibly ever need, plus you get the winning in information. Okay, so we're about to go to T-Bush, but before we do, I got to just say, there were some crazy storylines, whether we start on Thursday with the opening night game and the performance from Isaiah Likely at tight end. No one saw that necessarily coming, for the Chiefs winning, to the performance in Brazil, which, to be fair, I enjoyed the game, but I couldn't feel the environment come through the TV. So that was a little bit weird, but Sunday. And one of the things that happened off the field, and that is the Tyreek Hill incident. Now, yes, I'm a Dolphins fan, but I do want to just touch on the fact that I don't know that I had Tyreek Hill and Scotty Scheffler linked on my bingo card as being guys that would have similar circumstances. And obviously, we're still learning facts and details, but there is video of Tyreek Hill on his way to the Miami Dolphins home game to open this season, and not only being placed in handcuffs, it seemed like an aggressive situation. He talked about it after the podium. I don't have any video to show and content. I'm not licensed like that. Maybe one day. More importantly, whatever's going on with social media and the cameras and the cops and the players and the, athletes at games, something's got to be reevaluated. That seems weird that we're seeing guys that are supposed to be performing in the stadium or at the golf course and right outside the person, there's police that are taking them into custody and then creating more dynamic situations that are not good for anybody. So I hope good can come from it. We'll learn more. Don't necessarily care to break down what you think of the player or any of the details specifically, other than it didn't look like a good video and it's something worth monitoring. Now we're going to hear about it for the next couple of days. For the time being, I have more that I want to get into, but I want to get into it with my guy. And so I'm super, super pumped to bring him in right now. And that is my man, Terrell Bush. And there he is. T. Bush is in the house.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Good morning, my friend, man. It's been a while. It's nice to have you here the morning after football. How you feeling?
Feeling great, man. Feeling great. Everybody wants to say the NFL stands for the No Fun League, but I think it feels for the Never Fails League, because it never fails to bring us amazing excitement. It started out on Thursday night and continued all the way till last night, man. Can't wait to get into everything with you, man. Let's do it, Rip. I'm ready to roll. Let's do it.
Damn, I couldn't have asked for a better first guest on my newest show, The Morning After Football. So thank you for being here. Hey, before you do break it down, just let people know where you are, can be found, your content, anything that, you want to share. We want to get that off the top, and then we're going to dive into some games.
Yes, sir. Well, what's going on, everybody? My name is Terrell Bush. If you don't know me, me and Rip have joined through Live Take, the Live Take app, and now we're here on X and YouTube. You guys can find me at Terrell Bush 05 on Twitter, or Terrell Bush NFL. That is my work Twitter, and I have my personal Twitter. So you guys can find me on both of those platforms. On Instagram, you can find me at bush.xxi, which is 21 for my college number. And hey, just ready to bring you guys amazing content. I also have some sports columns that I'm going to start putting out on my own, and I'll get you guys the link to that. It'll be on my own personal Medium account, and ready to roll, man. Let's get it going, Rip.
Yeah. So look, in the future, just so you know, too, a lot of this stuff we're going to be able to throw up onto the screen and go through it and stuff. And
Nice,
so
nice.
Should be really cool. We are streaming right now live on YouTube and X, and it's really good to be here with you. Okay, so let's dive right into it. Where do you want to start? Because we could go a lot of places here. You tell me.
Man, let's because we ended off the last time we spoke with the NFL draft stuff, right? So let's throw the curveball and let's talk about the rooks, right? Let's talk about
perfect.
Williams. Let's talk about Jaden Daniels, and let's talk about Xavier Worthy on Thursday night, who showed off with 2 touchdowns. So we could start off with the Bears and Titans game from last night. Caleb Williams didn't have the debut that we all thought he could have had. Missed a lot of open receivers. Also was playing a little backyard football, what he's used to. He got away with that a lot at USC. Being able to scramble out, being able to create off-platform throws, things of that nature. But in the NFL, everyone's faster. In the NFL, everyone is more skilled, and Caleb just has to get used to the ebbs and the flows of the game at this professional level. But overall, I want to give flowers to the second half defense of the Chicago Bears and to the special teams of the Chicago Bears, who shut out the Titans, caught 2 interceptions, 3 sacks, had 1 pick return for a touchdown. And it was just an amazing second half performance. And what Caleb did do was not turn over the football. That's the positive that we can take away from this. He didn't turn over the football, and he was able to manage the game to the point where they were able to get their win. And he's the first quarterback that has won their season opener, drafted #1 overall since 2002. David Carr was the last one to do it. So, I mean, not the performance we would have thought he would have had, but a performance that got him.
Yeah. I mean, I'm looking through the box score right now, and I watched the game, and it wasn't not pretty. Looking pretty. It wasn't looking pretty. But look, at the end of the day, a win is a win. You go out there, you want to win, and sometimes you got to win ugly. Sometimes you got to win ways that you're not expecting. And look, he did say in his press conference, Caleb, that he has to be better, so we understand. But hey, they won, and Chicago should be happy, especially because of the special teams performance. Whether it was the defense, whether it was everything they were able to do in that second half, where they had 21 unanswered points. As they went into the half down 17-3, they end up winning 24-17. I mean, effectively, they let Will Levis self-combust because, the Titans were rolling. I thought for a period there at the start, Will Levis looked really good. I was surprised. I'm like, man, he's owning the game. Will Levis, this is something to monitor now, right? Because we're looking week one. What's changed? What's evolved? Where are we going with it? And as much as I thought, Caleb is going to come out and have a great game, it wasn't good. It was not great. Right? We got to be honest. But Will Levis looked great at the start. But then that's the thing with Will Levis too, right? Like that's what I see. It's tough to get through 4 quarters where it doesn't do something that you don't want. And that's what, Bozo plays. But look,
right.
Caleb, 14 for 29, 93 yards. Not the debut he imagined, but he did get the win. The Chicago Bears 1-0. Something they were not doing a lot in the past couple seasons was winning, and they did win this season. They're above 500, and so they'll take that. Let's go to Jaden Daniels, right? Because the other top cornerback pick, Jaden Daniels, he's playing, right? Because our next top quarterback, Drake May, not even playing yet. But so Jaden Daniels, what'd you think of the Jaden Daniels performance? Because there's a lot of there's a mixture there, right? There's not as good a team around him as say like Caleb has. And so he has to do a little bit more. But it also appeared like, what we expected from Jaden, which was a lot more running. 16 carries, 88 yards, 2 touchdowns rushing, some late that just, pad the stats. But, his numbers, if you just look at them, he did play better than Caleb. What'd you think about Jaden Daniels' performance in week 1?
I love Jaden Daniels' performance in week 1. Now, he wasn't able to get the win, but at the end of the day, he showed flashes of what we saw from his Heisman years, what we saw from him at college. And that's what you wanted to see. And that's why a lot of people like the Rookie of the Year choice going to Jaden Daniels, just because of his prolific ability to be able to create. Caleb is able to as well, but Jaden just has that it factor as well. And he has it in Washington where everything's going to be on his plate. And he did it against a Todd Bowles led defense. Now, say what you want about the Buccaneers, but they're coming off of a playoff victory against the Philadelphia Eagles last year. Now, I know Philadelphia tailed off, and we could get to that later on. But at the end of the day, this is a very good defense in Tampa Bay, and he showed up and he showed out for the most part. I don't know if 16 carries is sustainable, especially with his stature. He's not the biggest quarterback. He's a little light in the back end, if you want to say that. But at the same time, no. What
do you mean in the back end?
Yeah. But he's just a little light frame, I should say. Light frame.
All right. Yeah.
Let's pause that right there. Let's take a pause. Right. But at the same time, he was able to manage the game, no turnovers on his end. And I like the way he played. Now, Baker Mayfield came and showed up and showed out, passed for 289 and 4 touchdowns. And he had a great game in and of itself. But he was able to compete at that level with a Baker Mayfield on the other side. And I think he played a great game, man. I can't say anything less about Jaden Daniels. He had a great game. Great opening debut.
Look, jokes aside, in the back end, he played a really solid game, right? The thing I like the most about Jaden's game in week 1 was he had poise. It was like he's been here. Even though he hadn't been here on the NFL stage, he'd been there on the big stage with LSU throughout college. And, he's not going to be able to run 16 times a game and stay healthy. He cannot carry the ball as the leading rusher for the Washington Commanders each game this season and remain healthy and have a good season, because you can't be the quarterback getting 16 carries at such a slight frame when you're trying to learn everything about the NFL and then avoid all big hits. I know you can avoid many big hits, but we've seen it always in the history. So I'd like to see him cut that back. I know a lot of it was towards the end of the game where he's getting, picking up chunk yards, picking up those late touchdowns. Right. But more importantly, he was 17 from 24, 184 yards, average 7.7 per pass. QB rating 41.9, rating overall 91. You get 93. These are numbers that from a debut and just watching the eye test, he passed. He looked solid. Right. And Tampa, look, you said Baker Mayfield. We're talking new draft picks, but wow, Baker Mayfield, man, what a performance. I mean, I think he had the performance of the week, really, at the quarterback position. When you think about it, he was electric. So, that NFC South is looking wide open for the Tampa Bay Bucks right now. But
speaking to that quickly, Baker Mayfield.
Let's get into it.
For Buccaneers QBs in the last 10 years to have an 80% completion percentage and 4 touchdowns in their week 1 was Brady in week 16 of 2022 and Baker Mayfield yesterday. So that just goes to show you how prolific his performance was yesterday. Only other person to do it in the last 10 years in a Buccaneers uniform was Tom Brady.
Say less, right? Tom Brady.
Say less.
Say less. I don't have anything to add. We summed it up perfectly. Baker was electric. Let's go to another. Let's move away from top of the draft because we did talk about that recently in our last shows. Caleb, Jaden. Let's go to the top of the draft, but let's go to the wide receiver position because this is a guy who I admittedly was very high on, and I bet you were too. What'd you think of Marvin Harrison? Because where was he? Did he play? You know what I mean? It's like, what happened there?
It didn't seem like he was schemed into the offense well, which is kind of surprising because of how prolific of a player Marvin Harrison is. We both spoke highly about him on our pre-draft shows. Coming out, we already know how prolific he is as a player at Ohio State, the leader in yards and touchdowns all time in Ohio State Buckeyes history. So it's kind of surprising to see that he wasn't involved a little bit more. But I mean, hey, Arizona put up 28 points, at the same time, I guess they're still working him into the scheme and working him into the flow of things. But that just can't happen, though. I think that just can't happen. He can't end off with just one catch for 4 yards. That's just
one catch.
It's unacceptable.
One catch for 4 yards. How about 3 targets? Arizona receiving, they had 31 targets and he had 3. He can't be 10% on the target share when it's 3 targets in the game. And I know there's a clip out there where he's running wide open at the end of the game and Kyler doesn't see him. And that's okay because this stuff happens on the field. You don't necessarily see what happens. But with Kyler running around the way that Kyler does and extending plays, you would expect for a guy like Marvin Harrison to get open more often because now you're out of sequence. And so I'm taking this one. I'm going to give it a pass. Look, it is early in the season. These things will change, but I was shocked that Marvin Harrison was not more involved. Look, I think Greg Dortch can play. I like their other players, but Greg Dortch can't have 8 targets. Marvin Harrison have 3 if your ultimate goal is success. And so I hope to see that change. I'm going to chalk it up, like you said. It's some of that inexperience meeting. Kyler's just getting used to Marvin. They don't know each other. It's the first time. But I would think, in general, that when Kyler's out of structure, a guy like Marvin Harrison would be a great player for him because he can get open when he's being covered in a play structure. Out of structure, now he's just roaming. He's a guy that should be able to help you even more. So I'd love to see what happens there. But it does feel like maybe Kyler just needs some time with him. We'll have to monitor that. I was not, I was surprised by that. Okay, last thing with the rookies or the draft class, and I want to just talk about some of the games and stuff. Definitely. Was there any other rookie early in the draft, later in the draft, anyone that you thought or you were looking at that you were surprised by? I wanted to touch on.
I want to say, hey, our guy, Xavier Worthy. I mean, 2 touchdowns. 3 touches, 2 touchdowns. I mean, you can't ask for a better debut from him. He showed his speed on Thursday night on an end around where he was able to take it to the crib for about 30 yards. And you just saw the way that Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid is going to utilize him. Now, everybody on Twitter, when I got online that night, was thanking the Buffalo Bills, and rightly so, because they gave Kansas City potentially a Tyreek Hill 2.0. A guy speedster, a guy that could take the top off the defense, and pair him up with Hollywood Brown and Rashee Rice. When Hollywood Brown gets back, Rashee Rice, this offense is going to be dynamic, and it's exactly what the Kansas City Chiefs needed coming off of last year. Everyone on First Take and ESPN and CBS, Fox all said last year was the year to get the Kansas City Chiefs. This year, Now they have their weapons. They have the scheme. They have the tools that they used to have when they were winning championships with Tyreek Hill, and they still won championships without him. But now we can see the full scheme for Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes, and that's scary, man. It's really scary.
You said it the best you could. That's scary. And Xavier Worthy had a scary performance if you're a Buffalo fan or if you're a fan of any other team, especially that has to play the Chiefs, because it was his debut and he looked awesome. Like, he looked like he's going to fit into that scheme. Mahomes had great things about him, and there's no question that he just adds another element to the Chiefs roster and team that they don't need. They're already doing this without him. And now, he had an electric touchdown, running, catching. This guy looked awesome. And so I want to touch on one other rookie after I heard Xavier Worthy. I thought, man, you're right. Xavier Worthy opened up the season, was awesome. But you know who else was awesome at wide receiver and I think had my best performance at the wide receiver position? It's a guy in Jacksonville. I thought that Brian Thomas Jr., in watching the game, and obviously I watch all the games, but Dolphins, I watch even a little bit closer. I thought Brian Thomas Jr., just for 1 week at the wide receiver position, looked like the best receiver from the rookie class. I'm not saying that's how it goes forever, but he was open.
Dynamite.
He looked like he could do everything. He was, the touchdown, he looked like he's a seasoned veteran, and he's going to be a problem. And Jacksonville might have a guy. Look, I know the Miami beat Jacksonville. Jacksonville should have won that game. The Jaguars, they made tons of mistakes, but the Trevor Lawrence to the Brian Thomas Jr. connection is something to watch. He's excited to see it more. And anybody that has Brian Thomas on their fantasy team or is a fan of Brian Thomas, they're eating well today, because that guy looks like he's a dog. And the LSU receiver train continues. He's, everybody's been focused on Malik Neighbors, but Brian Thomas Jr. slipped through the cracks, and it looks like Jacksonville probably has replaced Calvin Ridley with a young dog that looks awesome. So I want to give him his flowers.
Yes, sir.
All right. We touched on some of the rookies, the highlights. What about some of the other games you want to dive into? I could just actually pepper you with some thoughts if you have. What was your overall best performance by a player all weekend?
Hey, man, I want to take it home. And for anybody that is a Birds fan, let's start off with Saquon Barkley. I know yesterday we have our performances, and I have a few here if you don't mind me going through.
Sure. Please do.
Once we get there. But I'm going to start off with Saquon Barkley, man. He preseason, first of all, thank you, New York Giants. Any Giants fans on, I appreciate you. Thank you. And I'm sorry, for yesterday. Man, that was rough. But Saquon Barkley, 2'6", coming down to Philadelphia in Brazil, he showed up and showed out, and he was the reason why we won the football game. He was able to carry the football at a high rate. He had 26 total touches, 132 yards, and 3 total touchdowns. One was a receiving touchdown in the left corner from a beautiful pass from Jalen Hurts. But you could just see the dynamic ability running the football and receiving the football, and that's something we've missed down in Philadelphia. Shout out to DeAndre Swift, shout out to Miles Sanders, but they just can't do the things that Saquon Barkley can do at such a high level. And this is the type of player, this is the Christian McCaffrey impact for the 49ers that we're going to have here in Philadelphia. And I think he's going to be somebody that if we're going to be able to go to the places that we want to go, it's going to be on the back of Saquon Barkley. I'm praying for health. I'm praying for everything up above. But at the same time, I think Saquon Barkley had himself a day down in Brazil where it seemed like they couldn't even get traction on that field. It seemed like they couldn't even cut left or right on that field. But Saquon had 132 total yards, man, and he was a breakout performer. So I want to give my flowers to Saquon Barkley. But I'm also going to, we mentioned him earlier, Baker Mayfield, man, for the statistic that I showed that I brought up earlier, being somebody on the list with Tom Brady, that's something big time, man. For him to complete 80% of his passes for 4 total touchdowns and no turnovers, that's something we have to look at. And it's a comeback story that needs to be highlighted more. Baker Mayfield needs to be highlighted more for the story that he's portrayed in this league, being somebody that's been bounced around, being somebody that's been counted out, but at the end of the day, never giving up and staying 10 toes down on who he is. And everybody in Tampa Bay loves him. He's got the locker room, he's got the coaching staff, he's got the owner, and he's got his new contract, and he is ready to roll. So I want to give my flowers to Baker Mayfield as well. And hey, I'm going to also give my flowers to somebody that necessarily I wouldn't, but for his performance, we got to give him his flowers too, because he's coming off of a breakout performance to end last season. And that's somebody in New Orleans, man. I know they were going up against Carolina, but Derek Carr had himself a day as well. Derek Carr, 19 for 23, 200 total yards and 3 touchdowns. I know it was against the Panthers, but like I said, taking it back to last year, they ended off the season beating the Atlanta Falcons 48-17, and it was a breakout game. They put up 45 plus points in back-to-back games to end and to start the season. I know it's against the NFC South. I know it's against a team that, you know, is probably going to pick first again in the NFL, but at the same time, got to give our flowers to him as well. And yeah, last but not least, Cooper Kupp. I saw you had a lot of things to say about Cooper Kupp last night, as you should. Anybody that drafted him in fantasy, you are a smart man. Cooper Kupp, 16 total touches, 120 yards and a touchdown. Even though it was in a losing effort, I still think Cooper Kupp had a breakout game. But yeah, man, Josh, I could go down the list. Josh Allen, Joe Mixon. It was a bunch of players that had great games, but those are the ones that I want to highlight.
Yeah, I like that. I want to just say, you know, look, Saquon Barkley, absolutely incredible in Philadelphia is his debut for the Eagles. I guess it wasn't even Philadelphia. It wasn't even in the States. He hasn't debuted for the Eagles yet in the United States. He will, obviously. But I put out a stat too, and this isn't to sort of rub it in or anything, but this is something that really has been on my mind since it's happened. When I watched the Hard Knocks episode and season with the Giants, all I thought was, what are the Giants doing? How are they going to let Saquon Barkley go for a couple $1 million and watch him go to their rival and act like he's just replaceable by saving a few $1 million when they paid their quarterback $160 million? And you have the owner telling you, like, it's really going to hurt if he goes to Philadelphia, and he's your fan favorite, and he's Saquon Barkley. I just don't understand it. It's like, we're doing this show, but quite honestly, I have no idea how the GMs of some of these teams get into those roles, because it doesn't make sense. I don't care that I'm a man in a screen right now with Dolphins jerseys behind me. I can do the job the way these guys are doing with some brain power, right? Saquon was awesome. He's 27 years old. The guy is in the prime of his career and showed up and showed out in Philadelphia's Game 1 win in Brazil. And I think this is going to be a hell of a season for the Eagles, especially Saquon himself. I put out a stat as I looked into this because, of course, in week 1 for the Giants, they scored 6 points. Daniel Jones had another pick 6, and Saquon Barkley has more touchdowns as a Philadelphia Eagle than Daniel Jones has as a New York Giant in the past 2 seasons. And Saquon Barkley has played 1 game.
Oh, my goodness.
You crushed it. Hey, you're an Eagles fan. I'm happy for you. I'm happy for the Eagles fans. I love football players that are awesome to watch, and Saquon Barkley is awesome. So that's really cool. You gave some love to Baker. I love that too. And Cooper Kupp, man. This one, it seemed so obvious to me throughout the offseason. This is a guy who you said his breakout performance, and it was a breakout performance, but it was sort of like a reintroduction.
Reintroducing myself.
Right? Hello, I'm back. And unfortunately,
reintroduce myself.
Unfortunately, we saw an injury to Puka Nacua. You never want to see injuries to great players. Anybody, your team, other teams, I hate that, right? Because we want to see the best out there competing with each other. And it was rough to see Puka go down, but Cooper Kupp is back. He's healthy, and as long as he stays healthy, he's a target machine. He had 14 catches on 21 targets. I mean, Stafford loves finding him. He knows how to find the open holes. It was a great Sunday night game. Rams come up short, but if you're a Rams fan, I think you're okay, and you're excited about the prospects this season because that Lions team is a good team, maybe great, potentially could come out of NFC this year, and you went toe-to-toe with them, could have had that game, if not a few things go your way. So it's a good night across the board for Cooper Kupp fans. How about this? Dynamic kickoff. What'd you think? Were you into it? Were you not? Because obviously it's the first time we did get a touchdown from a kickoff, which is 1 touchdown now from the kickoffs in 2024. We only had 4 touchdowns all season in 2023. So we're tracking above that. Any thoughts on the kickoff?
Oh man, I loved it, man. I loved it. It takes something to get used to. We also did a show on Live Take about the kickoff rule, and it takes some getting used to. Everything change is inevitable, and people have to get used to change and being able to adapt. They don't. One of my favorite quotes is, "Don't judge a man when he's comfortable. It's about what he adapts to." And I feel like all of these players did a good job yesterday of returning kicks. Shout out to DJ Dallas from the Arizona Cardinals, who took that joint 96 yards to the crib, man. It was a beautiful thing to see. But at the end of the day, that's what the NFL wants. They want to be justified for the things and the changes that they implement. And that is something that I feel like moving forward is going to be something that is kept around. I don't think we're going to see the old kickoff moving forward. I think the new kickoff is here to stay. And I think it's something that, fans should be excited for, because even though we saw a lot of kicks out the back of the end zone, we also did see a lot of kicks that were returned. And I think moving forward, that'll be something that we'll see for the foreseeable future. And I'm excited for it.
Yeah, totally. I thought it was a success, honestly. I didn't know what to expect coming in from the preseason because we hadn't seen much. Obviously, teams tight to the vest, but it takes a little getting used to as you're watching the way that you're used to your own team where they're kicking off all next to each other. Now they're down the field with the other team, and everyone's it's almost like you're playing freeze tag for a minute there, and there's just a ball in the air. No one can move, and then once it lands, everyone moves. So I kind of like it. It's kind of like, it almost looks like one of those Microsoft Surface commercials they used to use where they just have the people and standing and the ball goes and then they start moving the X's and O's, but it's like real football. I liked it. And it was cool to see DJ Dallas grab that touchdown. I think it's going to evolve and become a little bit more exciting. And also it's kind of cool with the landing zone. And then you're like, I kind of think the kickers where they're kicking it out of bounds by accident. It's like, you can't even get in the landing zone. It's like leaves for jokes and opens up some fun stuff. Right. And then some of the teams are just bombing. It didn't even care, like come out to the 30. So the interesting thing about the kickoff specifically is that, so if you don't, if you get the touchback now, it comes out the extra 5 yards or whatever. But I put this stat in my box score breakdown because I'm doing something this year specifically, but called box score breakdowns, where I'm going through the box scores. It's something I love to do and see sort of the stats that stick out to me in different ways. There were 6 teams in week 1 that averaged more than 30 yards on the dynamic kickoff returns. That was Buffalo, Arizona, the Chargers, the Cowboys, the Bears, and the Saints. So essentially, those teams were able to get better field position than if they had gotten, just a touchback or anything. Right. So that's something I want to watch. Like, how many teams are doing better field position wise, and how many guys or teams are really putting it up. Obviously, Arizona had 123 yards overall from the kickoff return because of that touchdown. But Chicago had 67 yards. The Bills had one return for 53 yards. So it's something interesting, and I like that it's an evolution of the sport a little bit. So kind of cool to see. All right, we've got a couple more minutes, my guy, and let's talk about one last thing, and I'll give you, some time if you have other things, but we've got one more game in week 1. We're not done yet. It's been a hell of a week. I know it started on Thursday, which feels like an eternity ago. Right. Then we went to Brazil. We went across the globe. There's games all over. Tell me about Monday night. We wrap up the Jets, Aaron Rodgers, Monday Night Football. Are we going to see him longer than we saw him last season? What should we get? I mean, this has got a great game potential written all over it with the Jets and the 49ers. What's your take?
Jets fans, man, let's do it, man. I'm happy for you guys. I'm glad 8 is back on the field. I almost said 12. I'm glad 8 is back on the field. I hope he's healthy and ready to roll, because last year was tough seeing him go down the way that he did. But he's back and he's ready to roll. Going to San Francisco is going to be a tough one, though. You're at San Francisco. They just brought back Brandon Ayuk and solidified that contract. Trent Williams and the guys are all home. They're all ready to roll. C-Mac is ready to roll. Everybody's good to go. And I feel like this is a test right out the gate, similar to last year. The NFL put them against the Buffalo Bills on Monday night as well. And now we're getting San Francisco versus the New York Jets. This is going to be a staple game. This is going to be something to see where the New York Jets exactly are. We know they have a great defense, but where is the offense? The quarterback position is something that the Jets have lacked in for the past couple of years, but the defense isn't. Now that they have the quarterback in place, how far and how good still is Aaron Rodgers? Is he still the Aaron Rodgers of old, the Aaron Rodgers that we're used to, the Aaron Rodgers that is a prolific talent and one of the best that ever have done it? Or is he, going down the slope a little bit and his age may show a little bit? We'll we'll wait and see. But at the same time, I'm ready to see this Jets team. I'm ready to see the San Francisco 49ers coming off their Super Bowl loss and how geared up they are and how ready to roll they are for week 1. So, hey, man, I'm ready. I'm excited. And, hey, Jets fans, I'm pushing for you. But I still think San Francisco may take this one.
It sounds like you're not 100% sure when you say may.
Hey, I got faith in A-Rod. I got faith in A-Rod, man. I got faith in A-Rod. But at the same time, I do think San Francisco, of course, wins this ball game. But I got faith. I got faith in 8, man.
You should have faith in 8. Look, no question about it. And this is going to be a great Monday Night Football game. Please, let's not have any injuries that mess up this game. The Jets always jet. Obviously, I'm a Dolphins fan, so people are going to say, oh, you're saying this and that. If you read my previews for this season, you know that I have the Jets winning the division. I think the Jets are set up for an incredible season. The only thing that worries me about the Jets is obviously, one, the health, right? Can they stay healthy? It's a question. If we're being honest, and I think A-Rod has a much better chance to play well today, especially because of the time from his injury is a real year. But Kirk Cousins looked awful coming back from his injury. Now, granted, time frames, Rodgers had a lot more time. Still think Rodgers is a better quarterback than Cousins anyways. But, something to pay attention to. But what Aaron Rodgers has is he has star players around him. Garrett Wilson, Breece Hall. In my opinion, these are the two most, from an elite young talent in the NFL, the Jets are at the top of the board with that elite talent. Garrett Wilson is about to show out and show off an entire world week in, week out with Aaron Rodgers as his quarterback. Breece Hall, in my opinion, it should have been a top player to be picked in fantasy football and is going to be awesome as well. And so Rodgers has weapons. He's got an insane defense with Sauce Gardner leading the way. And this is going to be a great game tonight. And if anything, this is the time the Jets wanted to go into San Francisco, where there's been a ton of turmoil for the 49ers. Talk about an offseason of just questions. They have had everything, but they've got Ayuk ready to go. Trent Williams signed. It's all late, but you would say in week 1, if anything, Ayuk's a little limited. Trent Williams didn't get his conditioning the same way, and even though he is the best offensive lineman in football, he's still going to need a little bit of rust to get shooken off. So if you want to catch the 49ers, it's probably right now. Their first-round receiver got shot. They're San Francisco, it's going to be emotional, but they have they're going to, it's going to take some time, in my opinion, for them to really get rolling this season. But it's going to be a heck of a game on Monday Night Football. San Francisco, New York. I can't wait for it. And hopefully Aaron Rodgers returns well. Okay, that's our Monday night game. Any other takeaways, comments, thoughts you want to share about week 1 in the NFL?
Hey, man, I just want to say we've had a great week 1. Let's continue the trend tonight of primetime games. The first 3 primetime games, Thursday night, Friday night, and also last night, all ended in one possession. Last night was a thriller in overtime. You saw Baltimore and Kansas City on Thursday night ended with just a toe. If Isaiah Likely wore a size 9, he would have had that touchdown, and we would have went on to see what would have happened from there. And then we had the ending in Brazil with the Eagles and the Packers. So tonight, just hoping for a good game, hoping to end off the week the positive way, like you said, and hopefully no injuries. And also yesterday, man, 6 of the first 8 first slate games ended in one possession. So we're getting really good games. We're getting really good teams coming out fired up and ready to roll. So let's continue the trend. Let's end off the week 1 the right way. And hey, man, just excited football is back, Rip. Yesterday was such a great day. I'm out here in New York. So, the weather was nice. It just felt like a great fall, sunny football day, man. Just going out and having fun and watching some football. So excited to continue talking to you, man. Thank you for the platform. I appreciate you for having me on. And hey, let's keep this thing rolling, man. Thank you for everybody watching.
Appreciate you, Terrell Bush. That's my man right there. He has a lot of great information, and we say goodbye to him. We'll see you next time on The Morning After. He is an awesome voice, awesome guy to talk to about the sports world and NFL specifically. He continues to crush it with his information, and he gives me a lot of food for thought when I'm thinking about the NFL. I'm thinking about the week that is, that week that was, and all of the upcoming games. And you heard it from him right there. You got to pay attention to guys like Saquon Barkley and the Eagles dominating. You got to think about how Baker played in Tampa, doing things that only Tom Brady has done, and some others. And so it is a fantastic week 1. And we finish up, as he mentioned, Jets, 49ers from San Francisco. We're going to take a couple minutes here as we get ready for the next segment and we talk fantasy football. We've gone through real football. I want to talk about the box scores in a minute, but I want to also take a second here to take a break, grab some water. We'll be right back. And we're being joined by my guy, Frank Amarante, very soon to talk fantasy football. Frank with some of the best content out there, and he's going to tell you why you lost your fantasy matchup, or maybe he's going to tell you why you won. Stick to it. We'll be right back, and we'll see you.
There's this guy on Twitter named Michael Ripp, Michael.
Yeah.
Rippe.
Oh, the Ripper?
Hey, is that what they call him?
Yes.
Riper?
That's what I believe.
He's some chief
Ripper.
something officer for some Bitcoin poker thing, but super analytics guy.
Okay.
He put out some good stats that we need to chit-chat about. Cleveland has a historically good defense. They've only allowed 1,002 yards through 5 games this year. That's the fewest by any unit since 1972. That's a long time ago.
Yeah,
wow. You know who that group probably was in 72? Probably a team that went undefeated.
Yep. Could have been.
If we had to guess, the Dolphins in 1972. Not 100% sure because he did not follow up with that. But we're watching in real time is a legendary defense in Cleveland. And if Deshaun Watson gets back in there and their offense can continue to go without Chubb, with Hunt and Ford, it's like, why not the Cleveland Browns, A.J. Hawk?
Why not? I mean, I think, believe me, there's a bunch of hope here in Ohio. I'm around a lot of Browns fans, and they've gone through the roller coaster as this season has gone, and they feel pretty good right now. I know that.
Let's talk about another one that he had about the L.A. Rams. Kyron Williams ran for 158 yards. The Rams finally got a run game. Okay.
Yeah. All right, we're back. I needed a sip of water. I needed to take a break, and I hit you with some loops of videos from last season. We are in the new season. It is 2024, and it's excited to continue talking football on the morning after. We talked a lot of real football already this morning, and there's a lot more to talk about. But, you know, a lot of people love to talk about fantasy. They love to live in a fantasy. They love to look and think about how their fantasy teams perform. And it's super, super fun to be able to compete with many other people in your fantasy leagues. Now, people are doing so many fantasy leagues, right? And so it's hard to keep up. There's different rules. There's different strategies. There's different settings for your league. So just want to make this clear in general. When you're talking or listening to fantasy stuff, you got to remember not every single detail or player is going to have the exact same effect depending on the way that you're playing. I understand that. So take what you hear and make sure that it kind of fits into what you're competing in, what you're playing in. But there's nothing more fun when it comes to football than locking in on a Sunday and scrolling your fantasy squad to see how you're doing. So with that being said, we got to break it down the week that was in week 1. And this guy does more fantasy football content than I can really imagine. I don't know how he does it, but he does it and he does it well. We're going to bring him in right now. That's my man, Frank Amarante. And you can find him on Twitter. I'll let him talk all about it. Frank, what's going on today? Good morning, my man.
Good morning. How's it going? Pleasure to be on the show. What a crazy week 1.
Yeah, what a crazy week 1. I mean, it's been a crazy offseason, and it was a crazy week 1. I appreciate you being here and super excited to break down fantasy. So let's just start from the top. What was your takeaway on week 1 from a fantasy perspective?
Well, I had a few disappointments. One of them specifically was Javonte Williams and how the Broncos used him. Like, I was hopeful, Javonte now another year removed from the serious knee injury. He showed renewed bursts in camp. I was hopeful the Broncos would lean on him, and they really didn't. And it wasn't like they were getting blown out the whole game and they went to Jaleel McLaughlin. They had a lead at one point. It was a neutral game script, which means tied or within 7 points for much of that game. And we saw a lot of Jaleel McLaughlin. So I'm wondering, maybe I'm interested to see how the Broncos use Javonte in week 2, but definitely not good signs.
Well, look, Frank, I wish I could be the bearer of good news here, because that was one area as I watched all the week of games that I thought, man, I was in early on the Javonte thing this year and I'm really excited for him. But as you watch the game, you wonder, are they not feeding him because they like McLaughlin? Are they just not feeding him? Does he have a chance to be better? Something to pay attention to for sure. Gotta admit, he's one of those guys I'm worried about. You might have to jump off the train earlier than early, but we'll see. But there's a lot to talk about. So was there a most surprising fantasy performance in week 1 for you?
That one was definitely surprising. Javonte, but I'm going to add another one too. Joe Mixon, 30 touches, 30 carries, and I think 3 targets. Complete workhorse. Like, we knew Joe Mixon would be the main back for the Texans, but not to this degree. Like, he was just completely fed. Dameon Pierce only had 3 touches. So even though Mixon, he's a veteran, there's always risk of decline. He showed no signs of that. And of course, the Texans being, an elite offense, you gotta fire up Mixon as a top 12 running back right now.
Hey, Frank, is it okay to say that the Bengals? Is it okay to say the Bengals could have used a guy like Joe Mixon in week 1?
Absolutely, and the Bengals are another story. Knocked me out of Survivor pool, and I'm sure many others as well. Yeah, Zach Moss scored a touchdown, but yeah, they could have used Mixon for sure. The Bengals.
I mean, on the bingo card of week 1, the Joe Mixon leading the league in rushing, going for 159 yards, 30 carries was not something that I had. And then conversely, when you see what happens in Cincinnati, where they couldn't get anything going, they had no running game, they had nothing, and they could have used a guy like Mixon. It's like, what? You almost feel like maybe he was an under talked about story. I thought Joe Mixon was on decline, but after week 1, I got to reevaluate. So it's a good point. Hey, let's go to that Bengals game. Any thoughts on? I mean, obviously, sorry to hear about Survivor, you and sort of all of America and everybody, right? I mean, but this is This is what happens in Survivor pools. This is how it happens. It's like so obvious that the Bengals should dominate, and then they lose to the Patriots, the team that I came into the season thought was going to have nothing to do with winning this season, is 1-0. But from a fantasy perspective, are we worried about Jamar Chase? I mean, he didn't play that well. Are we worried about, the running back situation in the Bengals? Do they have anyone? Joe Burrow? I mean, what should we look? T. Higgins doesn't play. What should we take from the Bengals in fantasy?
I think the biggest takeaway for the Bengals in this game before we go to their position players is their run defense is just atrocious. Last season, we saw the Bengals struggle defending the run when defensive tackle DJ Reader was out. Well, now he's on the Lions, and the Bengals got completely gashed by Ramondre Stevenson yesterday, allowing 4.8 yards per carry on 25 carries. Stevenson ran for 120 and a touchdown. It's going to be a major issue for at least the first part of the year, unless they could patch it up somehow. So that makes me love Isaiah Pacheco in week 2, who got good usage for the Chiefs. Chiefs are at home. You're likely going to see a big game from Pacheco against the Bengals.
Yeah, Frank, it's funny. You brought it right up because they got to worry about Isaiah Pacheco next weekend. And fantastic nugget there about the Bengals losing DJ Reader, because it was true. They literally lost DJ Reader, and it feels like they lost their entire ability to stop the run. And therefore, if they can't stop the run, they're going to have a lot of trouble this season doing anything. And you mentioned Isaiah Pacheco. I say, hey, it's okay, Cincinnati. You guys, it's just one game. You're routinely starting slow. Oh, guess who you get in week 2? The defending 2-time Super Bowl champions, who come in looking like they're ready to dominate whoever's in their way. And that's week 2 for Cincinnati, Kansas City. Hey, enjoy that, Bengals fans. It doesn't get much tougher than like what you said. So watch for Isaiah Pacheco in week 2 if you have him on your fantasy team or not. Let's move around the league. I like to do this. I can go places specifically, but what else do you want to talk about fantasy-wise, either from your kind of preview coming into the season or players that are on your list that you want to get some information out on?
I think one thing I want to talk about is the Bucs offense. So losing Dave Canales, their offensive coordinator, who did great with Baker Mayfield last year, made people, including myself, think, maybe they're going to decline a little bit, Tampa Bay. But new offensive coordinator Liam Cohen, who came over from the Rams, from the Sean McVay tree, looks like he's doing a great job. He's using Chris Godwin in the slot, which is where he belongs, and Godwin performed very well yesterday. 88 catches, 83 yards, and a touchdown. Caught all 8 of his targets. Godwin is going to be a nice value at wide receiver all year long for fantasy. And because the Bucs play 3 receiver a lot, Jalen McMillan, the rookie, could be an impact player later in the season. Maybe if you're in a deeper league. He caught a 32-yard touchdown pass. They just missed hitting him earlier in the game for a long pass as well. McMillan had a great camp. Mike Evans did his thing, 2 touchdowns. Bucky Irving showed some bursts, so he's likely to factor in a little bit.
Hey,
it's a good
Frank,
offense.
Frank, let me tap into the Bucky Irving thing, because that was a guy that I know a lot of people had on their radar. I definitely had him on my radar. I put something out that I thought Bucky Irving had a chance to make this a 2-man backfield during the season. It looks like Bucky Irving made this a 2-man backfield in week 1. I put out one of the box score numbers that I love. Bucky Irving had he had 9 carries for, I think it was like 60 something yards. I got to look at the stat that I have, but specifically he had a long carry of 31 yards, which is the amount of yards that Rachaad White had on 15 carries. Bucky Irving did that in 1 carry. So do you think that this is going to continue this trend with Bucky Irving in the Bucs? Or do you think that this maybe is a little bit more than he get? Or where do you see this backfield going forward?
Well, Bucky Irving coming into the season, I really liked as a late round pick, a late round handcuff who could maybe give you some standalone value. And look, he already did give you, it's not like he's a complete zero. He's a factor in this backfield. Bucky Irving has more bursts as a runner than Rachaad White, like you mentioned, with his 31-yard run. I know some people, because I did tweet out something similar with Bucky Irving, where like he had way bigger holes and his expected yards per carry was really high. But still, like you could tell when Irving runs, he has more burst than Rachaad White. Not to say White will completely lose his job. He's an excellent receiver out of the backfield, but Bucky Irving, great to have on your bench. And he's going to be getting carries and could limit White's overall ceiling.
He looks like he's a player, Bucky Irving. And that's the thing. When you watch him, it's like that's the kind of guy that you feel like should be on the field more because he's making plays. And interesting enough, as you started your breakdown on sort of the Bucs, it was the whole idea coming into the season was, oh yeah, Baker Mayfield had a great season because of Dave Canales. Mm-hmm. But if you look at the week 1 results, you maybe go, wait, did Dave Canales have a great season because of Baker Mayfield? And did based on the way that the Panthers perform, right? Maybe Dave Canales is the coach of the Carolina Panthers because of Baker Mayfield, the way that Baker Mayfield goes out there looking like the MVP in week 1. Now, granted, I get it. It's 1 week. It was the Commanders, but Baker Mayfield shined. And you said Mike Evans scored touchdowns. It's like the sun rising in the morning and Mike Evans getting touchdowns. This is a guy that just gets touchdowns. And he had 2 of them in week 1, right?
Yeah. What a start for Mr. Consistency there in Mike Evans. But to your point about the Panthers, like, oh man, they surprised me. I thought they were going to show improvement in the first game. I thought they'd keep that game close. I thought Chuba Hubbard would be, a viable flex play. I screwed up and started him over Brian Robinson in one of my leagues.
Oh.
Yeah, that stings. Definitely a player to look down on now after week 1 is Chuba because Miles Sanders played a bunch as well, and the Panthers are showing no progress.
Hey, I'm right there with you. I had Chuba Hubbard as an early season guy that you would want to play, and he didn't play well in week 1. It is just week 1, so there's going to be overreaction and reactions. Here's the thing. Let's go to some of the questions here, and we're going to keep moving around the league. Let's go to another battle in Florida. Right? Tampa's in Florida, but there's other teams in Florida as well. And that's the Miami Dolphins and the Jacksonville Jaguars. And they just happen to be playing in week 1. And in that week 1 game, we saw a lot of different things, right? Let's take a question, and I want to break the game down, but let's just start with the Jaguars because here's a question that we got from the chat. Clocks asked us, Evan Ingram, is he playing football, right? So what's the takeaway from Evan Ingram, who a lot of people had that, as a guy that's a PPR monster? He had, I think, 114 catches last season. He was Trevor Lawrence's guy, threw in, thick and thin. He didn't show up in week 1. Are we concerned about Evan Ingram? What's your take?
My take is don't be too concerned because it's kind of a weird game script for the Jags. Like Trevor Lawrence only attempted 21 passes. That will probably be his season low. That's likely never happening again for the rest of the year. Evan Ingram had 4 targets, which was tied for most on the team. Like he'll still be a mid-tier solid tight end. I don't think we're gonna see for Evan Ingram what we saw like in his last few games of last season when Christian Kirk was out. I think Ingram's production was a bit inflated from Kirk's absence, but Ingram should still be in the 6 to 8 range of tight ends. I don't think he'll completely explode though.
Yeah, it's something to pay attention to. And Shadow Chasers asks, "Oh, Ingram, how many times can he Kyle Pitts me in a row?" it might have to switch this if it continues. Kyle Pitts had a touchdown in week 1. That was new, whereas Evan Ingram did not. But Frank, and I agree, says don't panic just yet on Evan Ingram. Trevor didn't throw the ball as much. And look, I think in this Jaguars-Dolphins game, let's talk about some of the other players that were involved that, people came into excited about. The Dolphins loaded with players on fantasy rosters. Jaguars have some. Let's stick with the Jaguars, though, because let's go to their rookie wide receiver. They replaced Calvin Ridley. They draft Brian Thomas Jr. And for me, I thought Brian Thomas Jr. looked electric. I thought he's a guy that if he's on your roster as picked him up late, you might want to start considering him. He looked like he had a great connection with Trevor Lawrence. He was able to get open. He's able to make the tough catches. He's an LSU boy. Everyone's been talking Malik Neighbors, but maybe Brian Thomas Jr. is going to make people remember there's multiple LSU receivers that came out this year. What were your take?
Yeah, I love that call. You always love when you see, especially a first-round rookie start his NFL career positively, 4 catches, 47 yards, and a touchdown. He can establish himself as the top target in this group. And you got Brian Thomas later in drafts. You got to be feeling good right now.
Yeah, you got to be feeling good. What about Miami? Because Miami loaded with top tier fantasy players. When you think about Tyreek Hill, who I've contended is overall wide receiver 1, I thought Tyreek Hill came in. It wasn't really a great Tyreek Hill game, and yet he still pads the stat sheet with his longest career touchdown in his life, which is kind of interesting. The 80-yard bomb. He just does Tyreek things, and that's the amazing part about Tyreek is he could kind of be going around not doing anything, and all of a sudden, boom, he hits you with the 80-yard touchdown like it's nothing. But it didn't feel like it was one of those patented great Tyreek Hill games, and yet he's still right there at the top of the leaderboard. Thoughts on Tyreek?
Yeah, that just speaks to his excellence. Like you said, at any moment, he could just take one to the house, and he did here 80 yards. You got to love what you see. I agree. He's overall wide receiver 1, Tyreek Hill. I do love seeing Devon Achane get 7 targets and convert them into 76 yards. He caught all 7 of them. I think he got banged up, Achane, so we're going to have to see about him. Check in your leagues if Jalen Wright was dropped after being a healthy scratch. They have a short week this week playing on Thursday, so that's worth noting.
It is worth noting. Jalen Wright, great that you brought that up. Guy that a lot of people were drafting as insurance, as a third player. A healthy and active. Jeff Wilson ends up getting some carries and actually kind of leading part of the comeback there for a period. No sights of Raheem Mostert. Is that something to be concerned about, or is that just game script and maybe Mostert will get it going in week 2?
I think eventually Mostert could get it going. I think, if I'm not mistaken, he got banged up as well. I got to check in on that. But, you got to be a little concerned because Achane got some work in the red zone, and that's where Mostert's appeal came from, was his touchdown. So really, it's looking like Achane's backfield, and then you want Jalen Wright as a stash. If you do have Mostert, obviously you're not going to trade him at his, lowest value. You're going to hope for a couple spike weeks, then maybe try to move him in a trade, because I see this Achane take over like 10 carries and 7 targets is pretty impressive for week 1 for Achane.
Yeah, it looked like they were using Achane more in the receiving game as well, getting him open in these little screen passes or getting him out wide in space. I think that was my biggest takeaway, was immediately you have to get Achane in space. And when you do get him in space, he's a problem because he's so quick, shifty, that if he's in space with no one around him and he gets going, that's lights out. And he had a decent game, but it looks like he could explode for a lot more if he can stay healthy, which you could say about a lot of guys. We'll pay attention to the Miami team all season, I'm sure, because they're putting up numbers. I mean, Tua went for over 300 yards, leads the league in passing after week 1. And interestingly enough, and something to just watch, is I think Tua only had 1 scramble that was recorded because of penalties and stuff, but it did look like Tua was getting out of the pocket and running just a little bit more, which from a fantasy specific standpoint could be something that could matter. So something to pay attention to. Let's go to the Sunday night game. We got a question about Amon-Ra St. Brown, and I just want to touch on it. What in the heck happened to Sun God? Because Jameson Williams happened. What's your thoughts on the Sunday night game, which we saw Detroit? We saw the Rams. Let's start with the question about Sun God. Amon-Ra, are we concerned?
Well, coming into the year, I was a little lower on St. Brown compared to others, because if Jameson Williams is able to break out, that's just another target. And St. Brown's targets are usually like close, like they're underneath targets. So he needs a lot of volume for him to really, finish as a top 3 receiver in fantasy. Not to say I'm panicking on St. Brown, but I don't think he's going to repeat what he did last year. Jamison Williams looks great. Sam Laporta can continue to improve. Jahmyr Gibbs can continue to improve. There's a lot of options there, and St. Brown doesn't really make big plays. So that's the thing with me with St. Brown. But still, he'll bounce back. It just was one of those games.
Yeah, and thank you to the questions from everybody in the chat and watching, all 566 live viewers throughout this morning on the Morning After Football, GR Sports. He says he's panicking hard because St. Brown was his first overall pick. And there are a lot of people, but look, Frank says it, don't panic. I'm saying it, don't panic just yet. I mean, Amon-Ra is consistent can be. This is an outlier, I think, as you look back on this season, you'll say Amon-Ra got it going. But there are more mouths to feed. And from a Detroit-specific standpoint, from real football, it's a great thing for Detroit, because if Jamison Williams elevates, this team is really going to be a problem for everybody in the league, already being a problem. They added another element. Jamison Williams looked awesome. We'll have to monitor that as we move forward. But Amon-Ra, I think, will do better. As you said, let's flip the side there and go to the Rams, right? Because the Rams, another team with a lot of high fantasy talent right there, from Kyren Williams to Puka Nacua to Cooper Kupp. Thoughts on what we saw, because Puka goes out with an injury. We don't have a diagnosis just yet. It doesn't look great, in my opinion, and I'd be concerned. I was for a while, all offseason, pounding the table on Cooper Kupp. Cooper Kupp, 14 catches, ties his career high, 21 targets. Obviously, he looks back better than ever. What's your takeaway from the Rams side, fantasy-wise?
Yeah, you got to love what you see from Cooper Kupp, who's fully healthy. I was late to the party, late in the summer, joining in. I started to like Kupp over Puka Nacua. I took him in a couple leagues, and it was because I'm concerned about Nakua's injury in camp. And NFL Network's Greg Rosenthal went on an interview and was concerned. And when someone like that says that about Nacua, you get you take notice. They have their inside information, So that led me to Cooper Kupp, and he looked great, like you said. If Nacua misses time, like we just saw it, Kupp had over 40% target share, 21 targets, just crazy numbers. But even if Nacua is there, I still think Kupp outproduces him this year and finishes, as a top 7, maybe top 5 receiver. You got to love what you see from Kupp. Hopefully he stays healthy. I was surprised that Blake Corum didn't get a single offensive snap. He got a lot of positive reports, Corum did, throughout the offseason. I think eventually he's going to factor into this backfield. Not to say that he'll take the job like I was worried of late in the offseason with the Kyren Williams punt returner news, but there's a risk that he could. And it's not like Kyren Williams had a great game. Granted, it was a tough run defense against the Lions, and the Rams had O-line issues. But, Blake Corum could start to factor in as we get later in the season. If someone in your league sees that Corum didn't even see the field and drops them, get on that right away. Still a great handcuff. But with all that said, if you have Kyren Williams, you have to be happy with the fact that he had 18 carries and 3 receptions, and he barely left the field. So that's worth noting for sure. But the main takeaways is wheels up for Cooper Kupp.
Yeah, wheels up for Cooper Kupp. I'm going to questions that I put out. I asked people to drop in last night their biggest fantasy football question after week 1 on X. And I want to just run through some with you to see if your takeaway. So let's just go through one I want to stick on. There's a lot of Javonte concern, obviously. Let's move to Terry McLaurin and JSN because Louis asked, is there worry about Terry McLaurin and JSN? Thoughts there?
Okay, so for Terry McLaurin, there's definitely some worry because the Commanders' offensive line just is not good at all, and they're just really throwing a lot of screens and short passes. So you're going to get some of these games like we saw yesterday, a dud for McLaurin. Maybe, we were hyped McLaurin being basically the only main weapon for the Commanders, but there's going to be some boomer bust to his production because until the Commanders get their pass protection in check, you got to think McLaurin, lower mid-range receiver 3. JSN, I was surprised because maybe the Broncos' pass defense is better than we thought. Patrick Surtain is there. Geno Smith really struggled, only 171 yards. The Seahawks were able to run the ball effectively. I think, we got to temper our expectations going forward on JSN. He didn't do much last year, and it already starting poorly in year 2. More of a wide receiver 4. Leave JSN on your bench until he gives us, something to be more optimistic about.
Totally. And big shout outs here from the guests listening. Great guest on the show. Appreciate you, JC. And of course, it's great to have Frank here breaking it down. Another question from Mighty asked about Dalton Kincaid and the Buffalo Bills. I mean, what should we expect on Kincaid rest of the season?
So it was one of those games for the Bills. They ran it, like, if you look at, like, Josh Allen only attempted 23 passes. So that was one thing that resulted in Kincaid's struggles. But also the good news is Kincaid had good usage. I saw someone tweeted out he was on the field quite often. I'm trying to pull up the stat. Basically, I think Kincaid is a buy low. I think he'll get going when the Bills have to pass him more. Here, I found the stat. It's from Dwayne McFarland of Matthew Berry's Fantasy Light. Kincaid played 88% of the snaps, ran routes on 83% of Josh Allen's dropbacks, but only had 9% target share. I think that will change. They'll get Kincaid more involved. Don't panic on him. Pretty similar to Evan Ingram, who also had a dud, like we spoke about earlier.
Yeah. Nice breakdown. Don't panic. I mean, tight end was tough in week 1. There was only 5 tight ends that scored a touchdown, and only one of them was drafted with an average draft position of the top 17, and that was Kyle Pitts, who was tight end 7 coming into the season. The other guys who scored touchdowns, Foster Moreau, nobody was drafting him. Jawan Johnson, these guys, Isaiah Likely led the tight end position, but these people were not being drafted. So if you drafted an elite tight end or you got one of these guys and it wasn't Kyle Pitts, you probably were like, wait, what happened to my star tight end? Because, Trey McBride, nothing. These guys had some points a little bit, but there was nothing electric from the tight end position. And we got to monitor the injuries too, because we saw Jake Ferguson go out. We saw David Njoku. So tight end is something where you're really going to want to tap into and sort of pay attention. Let's just take a couple more of these questions. I'm looking through right now. I said Isaiah Likely. What's your take on the Isaiah Likely performance in week 1? And where does that leave Mark Andrews going forward in the 2024 season?
Well, the good thing about Likely is both Likely and Andrews were on the field quite often in that game, so both of them can produce. I will say probably both Andrews and Likely cut into each other. Like, it'll be tough for both of them to have good games in the same matchup. You got to bump down Andrews a little bit. I was already low coming in compared to everyone else, like tight end 7. I think I had him just because I was a big believer in Isaiah Likely's talent. I thought Likely was too good to go back to his previous role. But, Andrew should still be in the Evan Ingram or maybe a little lower, maybe like around Brock Bowers range. Both him and Likely around there, I would say. Like Bowers, Pitts, Ingram, and Njoku, all in that tier. You got to be happy if you have Likely. There's no way you could bench Likely after what he just did in week 1. Give him another one. If you do have Andrews, you paid up for him, fire him up again. It's an interesting note, though. Someone brought it up that I was talking to yesterday. The Chiefs seem to do a really good job on Mark Andrews. They really focus their defensive attention on him. If you look at Andrews' game log against the Chiefs, like, he's been pretty shut down against them. So that could also have played a role as in Andrews' poor game. Ravens, who they got next week, just pulling it up. They're home to the Raiders. We could see Andrews get back. So in short, if you have Andrews, fire him up again and hope for the best.
And I'll just add this. In short, if you drafted someone first round, second round, third round, fire him up. Week 1 is 1 week. You got to still, believe in what you built your entire teams on in fantasy, built your ideas, and give it a little bit of time here, especially with your stars. And Mark Andrews, if you drafted him at tight end, is considered one of your fantasy superstars. Let's finish off with the Twitter X questions, where Steven asked, how does Olave's performance, does it scream panic mode, or are you concerned?
I think that was just that's the thing with it is concerning because you look at the boxer, see 47, and you're like, damn, Olave must have went off, and he only went 2 catches for 11 yards. I would say don't be too concerned because it's similar to Ingram and Kincaid, but with a receiver. Because Derek Carr only attempted 23 passes. The Saints controlled that game throughout. The Saints, despite their blowout win, I still don't think they're a good team. I think they're like, if maybe I'm a little wrong, maybe they're 7-8 or 9 win team, but they're not going to be blowing out teams often. And now they're going to have to pass more, is what I'm saying. And Olave is their top target. So I wouldn't panic in the sense like he's going to be a complete bust. Having said that, I don't think Olave was worth going in the second round just because of concerns about the Saints offense. But hey, scoring 47 points in week 1 with new OC Clint Kubiak, maybe their offense is better than I thought. So that's good for Olave when the Saints have to pass a little more. So stay the course and don't worry too much.
Like that type of advice right there from you, Frank. And specifically, the Saints don't play the Panthers every week. So we'll have to sort of monitor against another team, not just the Panthers. These are things that we're trying to break down here to think about. Now, here's the last thing, Frank. We took a lot of questions and appreciate everyone that dropped questions into either X or into the chat here. A lot of good people watching and listening. What about from you? Is there any one player, and I know it's only 1 week, but are you changing your opinion specifically on anyone from a positive or a negative, right? Because eventually here and really moving into week 2, we're going to start to forget about average draft position, who's on the team. It's just about winning and finding the good player. So has your opinion shifted dynamically, specifically around any players, and if so, who?
I think, close to the draft season, I moved Malik Neighbors a lot higher. I like in the top 15 receivers. I have to, if I was doing rest of season rankings, I'd have to move Neighbors a little lower, maybe in the, low 20s or something like that. Just because, obviously I was always concerned with Daniel Jones, but this matchup against the Vikings, who, on paper, they don't have a really good secondary, the Vikings don't, and they don't have much of a pass rush. They lost Daniil Hunter, Minnesota did. I thought Daniel Jones, this would be one of his games where, he did decent. And he was horrible. 186 passing yards on 42 attempts against the Vikings. It's not good for Malik Neighbors, and there's going to be some more boomer busts. I would have to downgrade Neighbors a bit because I was already probably too high on him. So I have to be held in check with that one.
All right, well, I'm here to hold you in check, Frank. But you know what? Daniel Jones did have a touchdown. The problem was it was to the other team. He did throw another pick six. It feels like you say Daniel Jones and pick six often. Imagine if they had a guy like Saquon Barkley at the running back position, but that's for another day, not here nor there. Okay, we're about to finish this up, and this has been an awesome time talking to you. I hope we do this more. But here's the thing. Week 1 is not over. Even though it's been a long week 1, we started on Thursday. We went to Brazil on Friday. We had a whole slate of Sunday games. We finished with Monday Night Football, San Francisco, the New York Jets, both teams with loads of talent at the top of fantasy drafts, whether it's Breece Hall, Christian McCaffrey, Garrett Wilson, Brandon Ayuk, Aaron Rodgers returns. Anything you're looking for, excited about in tonight's Monday Night Football game that wraps up the week 1 of the 2024 season?
Yeah, I'm excited to see how Aaron Rodgers looks. It's an improved Jets offensive line, bringing in Tyron Smith and Morgan Moses. I'm watching Kirk Cousins in his first start off the Achilles. He did not look good. So I want to see if Rodgers looks better. That makes me a little bit worried because Rodgers coming off the Achilles, but at least Rodgers had a longer recovery time by a little bit. But in terms of fantasy, of course, we're thinking Garrett Wilson and Breece Hall are going to dominate touches. I think they will even more so in this game because Mike Williams is going to be brought along slowly. So you're going to look for the Jets to really rely on their studs in Wilson and Hall here. As for the 49ers, with CMC banged up, with Ayuk, probably limited a bit. He missed all of camp. I think Deebo Samuel is going to be a total focal point of the offensive game plan for San Fran, either out of the backfield, a lot of targets. I like the Jets to pull off the upset, but it should be a great game.
It should be a great game, that's for sure. And obviously, you start your studs, and I'm sure there's a lot of matchups riding on today's result tonight. You made a good point about Aaron Rodgers and Kirk Cousins. It was something I talked about earlier in the show with my first guest, Terrell Bush, and that was that the way Kirk Cousins performed concerns you coming back from injury, but at least in Aaron Rodgers' case, his injury happened a real year ago, so his recovery has had more time, and it feels like he should be healthier than what we saw from Cousins. Plus, he's just a better quarterback than Kirk Cousins. So we'll have to monitor that. Hopefully he stays healthy, and hopefully it all goes well. All right, we're going to get you out of here on the last thing. Anything else you want to drop for the fans? Anything you're looking forward to for week 2 specifically? And then we're getting you out of here.
Yeah, sure. So you can find me on X at FMRanteTFJ. You can find all my NFL and fantasy content at thegameday.com. I got week 2 rankings coming this week, sleepers, start and sit. Lots of good stuff to help you make your lineup decisions. Hopefully you win your matchup if you need it on Monday night. I need big games from Garrett Wilson, Breece Hall, and Deebo Samuel across a couple leagues. We'll see how it goes.
Well, you said a lot of great names and great players. I think a lot of America and the world is just like you, needing big games from a couple of them, one of them, someone, or maybe they need them not to have big games because they're going against them. However it goes, I hope you enjoy the game tonight. If you're wherever you're watching, whoever it is, you've got great information. As you said, you can follow Frank, obviously, on X. You can follow Frank and get more information where he puts it up. Always, I love reading your stuff and watching it. You're so tapped in. You always bring the updates. You bring great information and data to go with it. And it's been an absolute pleasure. Frank, appreciate you joining us. We'll see you next time.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'd love to come back. I had a great time, great talk. Good week.
Yeah, man. Fantasy with Frank. We'll get you back. Appreciate you. Again, make sure to follow Frank, and we'll see him down the road. Have a good day. All right, guys. Look, we went with the real football the first hour. We moved into the fantasy, and it's important because you guys have questions, and I want to bring you the answers, whether it's from me or with a guest that has some of these answers. A big shout out to Terrell Bush and obviously Frank as well. At the same time, appreciate everybody that's tuned in, tapped in. 693 live viewers right now, which is incredible, as we're just talking week 1, the morning after football. It's been a fun show. I don't want to finish just yet because we went a little bit long with my guests. We're going to wrap up here in the next few minutes as you guys get ready, probably for the Pat McAfee show. Now, look, I love the Pat McAfee show. You learn a lot about football. You're going to learn a lot about what happened in week 1 and break down potential injuries, concerns moving forward for week 2. If you do have any final questions, we'll put them up, throw up some of the chats as I and going through. But I did want to do this last thing to break down my thought, because in 2023, I put out every week my takeaways. And so everybody has their takeaways, and I think it's really important. But I want to do something different this year before the show, and I've done it already for week 1, and that's the box score breakdown. Because when you look at the box scores, you can really learn a lot about a game that you maybe didn't see. Maybe you watched and your eyes deceived you, or you missed some stuff. I think it's really important to see what the actual numbers and stats look like as you move forward. And so let's go to my box score breakdown and just talk about some of what I actually saw in the box scores as I look. So these were the 9 major keys from week 1. And we're going to start here with Cooper Kupp. Cooper Kupp, he shined in week 1, right? There's no question about it. He was awesome. He stuffed the stat sheet. He had 14 catches, 110 yards, 21 targets, a touchdown. I've been talking to you about Cooper Kupp all offseason. He was the guy to get fantasy-wise, but in real football, the man is back. He is more than healthy. And as long as he stays healthy, Cooper Kupp is one of the best receivers in football, and the Rams are going to be dynamic with him. That was an awesome stat line from Cooper Kupp. You go to Jacksonville. Are we to be concerned at the running game, where both Tank Bigsby and Travis Etienne both had 12 carries, and Tank Bigsby 73 yards, Etienne 44. Something to pay attention to there. You go to Buffalo. They had 9 different players catch a pass. but no one caught more than 4 passes. Talk about spreading around the rock. They actually targeted 10 guys. Ty Johnson got a target in there, didn't catch it. But so you see Buffalo using a ton of different receivers. Daniel Jones, he returned for the Giants, and yeah, it was not pretty. He did have no touchdowns unless you count the 1-2 Minnesota in the pick six, 2 interceptions. Bucky Irvin, 1 carry for as many yards as Rachaad White had on 15 carries. That's right. Bucky Irving, 31-yard carry for his long out of 9 total. He doubled up Rachaad White, who had 31 yards on 15 carries. It looks like, I don't want to say changing in the guard yet, but something to watch. 6 teams averaged more than 30 yards on the dynamic kickoff returns. That was Buffalo, Arizona, the Chargers, the Cowboys, the Bears, and the Saints. Something to watch as we continue. And of course, Arizona, DJ Dallas, the first touchdown from the dynamic kickoff return. 2 teams had a +3 turnover differential with 0 giveaways. Those 2 teams, it was the Steelers and the Chargers. And guess what? They won. And then guess what? 2 teams had a -3 turnover differential, 0 takeaways. That was the Falcons and the Raiders. And guess what? They lost. Yes, those 2 teams played each other. I know, but that's the point. You win the turnover battle by a significant number, you win the game. And we saw that in both of those matchups in week 1. And then finally, for all the talk that we saw this offseason about the Texans receivers, and we saw the talk about Stephon Diggs, who had 2 touchdowns, not a lot of yardage. Nico Collins dominated. Tank Dell did well. It was the running back they signed in the offseason, Joe Mixon from the Bengals. Leads the league in rushing now with 159 yards. He got 30 carries. The Texans, a well-oiled machine in week 1 from the wide receivers to the quarterback to the running back. Joe Mixon highlights a week 1 that was awesome. And that is the box score breakdown in week 1. Those are 9 major keys that I think will help you get more in line for the rest of this season. NFL is back, people. Week 2 is upon us. It's starting soon, but we finish week 1 tonight with the 49ers and the Jets. This has been an absolute pleasure. We've ran through football, real fantasy, and I couldn't do it without my guests. Big shout out to Terrell Bush. Follow him all across social media, and my man Frank, who you just heard a lot about. We're going to do this again. Wait till you see who we bring on next week and moving forward. Remember, if you're just tuning in or you missed the start, the idea behind the morning after is to help you understand football and what happened in the week that was and what could happen in the weeks that will be, and to talk about it. So I appreciate everyone for joining, for listening, to watching, to typing, to commenting, to sharing. This can only do as good as the support that I get from you. And so for that, I appreciate it. If you are a sponsor, a partner, you want to be involved in the show, producing, advertising, we've got a lot of space to grow this, to make this the best show on X, on YouTube. That's right. We live streamed it to X and YouTube today, the first time ever on YouTube. And man, it was a lot of fun, a lot of great conversation, and a lot of great takeaways. Make sure you're following me on X at Michael Rippey. You know my stuff. You see it regularly. I think we're going to win a lot this season, not just in week 1, but every week. At least that's the goal. And if we don't, we'll still be here to take your comments, your feedback. For that, for week 1, for September 9th, 9/9/24. Remember, I started by saying some of you are going to use the date 9/9/24, but some of you might use those numbers 9/9/1 because your team needs help and it's an emergency. I hope that's not you. For myself, for my guests, for everyone that tuned in, I really appreciate you all, and I really appreciate all of the support. We had 700 strong in here. Let's get to 4 digits next time. Remember, like the Manny Cast, we're going to do this as much as I can the morning after. We're here next week, 7:30 a.m. Pacific, 10:30 a.m. Eastern, right back here for the morning after week 2. Wait till you see the guests. We're going to make this better and better. And without you, I wouldn't be able to do it. So appreciate everyone. Have a wonderful, wonderful start to your week, and enjoy Monday Night Football. The New York Jets, the San Francisco 49ers. We'll see you next week.